Hi, I'm Patrick Greenwood. I am the author of Forever Our Sunrise in Saigon and Shores of Okinawa. As part of my writing journey, writing about fiction and non-fictional blend type of writing styles, I have come across several very interesting events during my writing time. When I was specifically writing about Shores of Okinawa, which really, to give you a little bit of a backdrop of the story, it is about China hacking Taiwan, which is a very non-fictional thing that's happened. However, many things that I wrote in the book starting in 2019, when I first started crafting the story, included things like China hacking underground fiber optic cabling between China and Taiwan, and hacking groups in Laos and Vietnam and Russia came to the rescue of Taiwan to try to save them from the Chinese hacking them, even though they got double crossed. And more importantly, some of the other things that I put in this story, which really, again, was designed to be fictional storytelling back in 2019 and 2020. Um, I learned later on in 2024, about 4 weeks before the book came out, my father sent me a link from a Newsweek article saying China has successfully hacked fiber optic cabling underneath the ocean directly to Taiwan's backbone network. so, so what originally started in my writing as fictional storytelling turned out to be true. Well, during the time that I was visiting Taiwan about 4 months ago, prior to the book release, I was taking pictures in order to set up for my video promotion, first promoting the book, Shorts of Okinawa. And while I was there, I noticed several people were actually kind of looking at me and taking pictures of me, and I didn't really think much of it until I went to the city of Tamsui, where I was taking some very, very important backdrop pictures for the promotional video, and I found somebody following me in real life, and I was looking a little nervous, a little curious, and thinking, okay, why would they be following me? Why would they care? And I really didn't understand why. But ultimately, as I was walking around the harbor and I was taking pictures and shooting video to kind of promote the book a little bit, I turned suddenly and this guy kind of jolted himself. He's sort of like, I caught him by surprise. And I really kind of put a little eeriness into me that here I am in Taiwan. Obviously, there's a lot of friction going on in real life between China and Taiwan. Here's this American taking pictures. And I realized that I was drawing unnecessary attention, even though I was there to really kind of do research and things like promoting a book. So even though the intent of the book of Shores of Okinawa was really based on some fictional stories, reality, though, is that many of the things that ended up in the book became real. And as a writer, we set out to write a book. We want to tell a good story. We kind of go a little bit, liberty on the fictional stuff, kind of make it a little bit more exciting, people to kind of capture the characters, to capture some of the storylines and plots and so on. But to discover that 4 weeks before the book came out, that several of the fictional things that I put in actually turned out to be real. And that was a real sobering reality for me when I was leaving Taiwan and flying back to the United States. On the entire plane ride home back to Los Angeles, I kept thinking to myself, what's going to happen when this book comes out? So the book released on time. It came out when it was supposed to come out Labor Day weekend, 2024. Had a great opening week, had a lot of great reviews. People have read the book. They love the story. But very similar to my Forever Our Sunrise in Saigon, which was my first book that I wrote, a lot of people come back and said, dude, how much of this is real? How much of this is fiction? And in Forever Sunrise in Saigon, it was pretty clear. I knew which parts were fiction. I knew which parts was a little nonfiction. And I kind of kept that as a secret. But to be very honest with you, with Shores of Okinawa, after seeing some of the things that have shown up in Newsweek, they've shown up in Time Magazine, they showed up on the news, on Fox News and CNN, and even Sky News in England, talking about China hacking Taiwan, I have discovered that a lot of the stuff that I thought was fictional is slowly coming true in some aspects. So you never know until you know, right? But as writers, we hope for authenticity, we hope for credibility in our writing. Many times we blend non-fictional storylines into a fictional story to add a little layer of believability to your story. And for me, after discovering what I have discovered, yes, oh boy, I can't wait for this book to be out a year, and maybe 90% of the book maybe turns out to be non-fictional, or thank God, maybe it'll actually stay fictional as well. But anyway, I hope you like my books. Forever Sunrise in Saigon and Shores of Okinawa are both available on Amazon.com. Hope you have a chance to check them out as well. And if you really like the books, please leave me a review as well. Take care. Thanks. Great to meet you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Relatable Voice Book Fair 2024. I'm your host, Lucia Matuonto, and today we are diving into celebrating pets and sharing nuggets of hope through storytelling. We have two wonderful authors with us who share a deep love for pets and have beautifully shared their experiences with animals into their books. So let's meet our guests. First, we have Kim Lengling, an author, publisher, podcaster, and January's cover star for the Relatable Voice magazine. So welcome, Kim. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. This is fun. I've been looking forward to it.
Yes, it's our pleasure, and we are super happy to have you here today. And also, we are thrilled to welcome Michael Hingson, a number one New York Times bestselling author and inspirational speaker. So, Michael, welcome to the RV Book Fair.
And we have a podcast called Unstoppable Mindset as well. So it keeps busy, but thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you, too. And I'm also delighted to introduce my co-host, Pat Backley. Pat is an author of 8 books, a columnist for the RV magazine, and has been part of the RV Book Fair family since our first year. So, Pat, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lucia. I'm delighted to be here, delighted to meet Kim again, who I met, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before on the book fair. And Michael, it's a pleasure to meet you. I have read a little about you and I'm terribly impressed with what I read. You have quite a story. So I'm looking forward to hearing more. Thank you so much. Okay, so to get started, ladies first, as Lucia said, Kim, you wear many hats as a storyteller, publisher, and podcaster. Can you share how your journey as a storyteller and publisher began, please?
It began as a lot of other folks' journeys did when the world changed in 2020. My background is sales and marketing, and that's what I did for 25 plus years. And all of a sudden, doors closed in the country I'm in, which is the United States, across the country because of COVID. And I found myself out of a job, and I wasn't expecting that. And I thought, wow, what am I supposed to be doing now? Because I'm at a certain season in life where that was unexpected. And I thought, I've been writing for a while. I've been a co-author in some anthologies, and let's figure out what I want to do, because I didn't want to send out resumes. So I decided, all right, Kim, ask yourself 3 questions. What are you good at? What do you like doing? And what are you passionate about? And then let's do something about it. Let's make something happen. And that's when I just decided, you know what? I'm going to write more, because that's what I like doing. I'm going to coordinate anthologies because I love bringing other people together to share their stories in anthologies. And then I started a podcast called Let Fear Bounce, because fear was floating everywhere and it felt like it was being fed to us on a daily basis. And I personally thought, no, not me. I'm going to let that bounce. So all of it kind of came together at the same time in 2020.
Thank you. And I understand that entirely, because I started my author career in lockdown as well. Mine was for a similar reason. I was suddenly on my own after many years, and I was bored and unhappy, and I lay on the sofa for 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks, watching rubbish on Netflix, eating too much chocolate and drinking too much wine. And I thought, Pat, this is ridiculous. This could go on for a while. Get a grip, do something practical. Why don't you write a book? And like you, that started a whole new career for me at the age of 70. So I was a little bit further down the line than you. Best thing I've ever done, best career I've ever had. 3 years on, I'm just so happy. So I understand exactly your passion. And aren't we lucky to be doing something that we love? Because I've had some great careers, but I've never loved my career the way I love this author one. And I'm sure you and Michael are the same. Sometimes chance brings different opportunities, doesn't it? So thank you for that, Kim. Thank you.
I started also writing during the pandemic. I was in Spain and we could not leave. Not really. It was terrible. It was really hard here. And I said, I need to write all the stories I used to tell my patients because I'm a physical therapist and I had many stories to tell. So that was the moment. And was terrible to have a pandemic, but at least in our case, we could do something for ourselves and inspire people as well. So, Michael, as a best-selling author and speaker, what was the turning point that inspired you to begin writing?
Well, so first of all, I have to also talk about telling stories because that started a lot earlier. I was in a job, in a position in 1979, and it was a job dealing with helping to develop and refine a piece of technology that made it possible for blind people to read any kind of print or written or rather typed or a combination of printed and typed material. And in June of 1979, I was told that I was being laid off because of the fact that I wasn't a revenue producer. It was a new company, a startup. And the bottom line is that they needed to get more revenue producing people. So I was being told I was going to be laid off. Then the guy paused and he said, unless you're willing to go into sales. And what we want you to sell is not the reading machine for the blind, but we have a commercial version, which is more expensive, and we want you to sell that. And I very quickly decided that I would lower my standards, as I love to say, and go from science to sales. And so I've been selling ever since. And the reality is I had learned a lot about sales before then, but I didn't really understand it or know what I was doing, even though I had done it. So I took a Dale Carnegie sales course in 1979. And what I learned from that was a lot about what real sales is about, which is teaching, which is guiding. And I've quickly realized that the best way to do that was through personal stories. And so I have been addressing life essentially ever since that way. Well, so for me, the turning point was on September 11th, 2001, I worked in the World Trade Center on the 78th floor of Tower 1. I had opened an office for a company. I ran the office. I had staff. And on September 11th, we were going to be teaching some of our partners how to sell our products. And of course, you all know what happened. The building was attacked and so on. And I escaped with my 5th guide dog, Roselle. And then in 2002, a gentleman named George Berger, who was at that time the publisher of the American Kennel Club, or AKC Gazette, said, you should write a book. And I said, I hadn't thought about that. Why? He said, people will be interested. Well, now advanced from 2002 to 2010, I was contacted by a woman named Susie Flory who said she was writing a book, and I didn't know Susie, but she said, I'm writing a book. I'd like to include Roselle's story. Would you tell it to me? And I did. And she then said, after about 45 minutes of conversation, you need to write your own book. Well, I had been working on what George had suggested from 2002. And as I love to say, I had over a megabyte of notes that I shared with Susie. Anyway, we began writing together in a collaborative way. And Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust at ground zero was published in August of 2011. And it became, in its first week, a New York Times bestseller. And 1 week, it was actually #1. So it was on the bestseller list for 13 weeks. Then my second book, Running with Roselle, which we decided to write for children, although more adults even today buy it through Amazon than kids. That was published at the end of 2013. But like you, well, both of you, Lucia and Kim, in a sense, then my story changed in 2020 because I had been traveling as a public speaker ever since 2001, the end of 2001. People asked me to come and talk, and we decided, my wife and I, at the time, now my late wife, that telling stories, talking about trust and teamwork, leadership, and other things like that was a lot more relevant. And as I put it, selling life and philosophy is a lot more rewarding and pertinent and relevant to the world than managing a computer hardware sales team or selling hardware. So I switched to public speaking and was doing it until 2020 when the pandemic hit and travel stopped. And I realized that for 19 years, I had been talking about the fact that I escaped without becoming so overwhelmed by fear that I didn't know what to do. The reality is I had done a lot to prepare to know what to do on September 11th. And so I realized a mindset had kicked in, and I ought to teach that to other people. So I began working on a book, again, collaborated with a friend of Susie's, because Susie was busy with her PhD program. She's getting a doctorate coming up soon. And so I worked with Carrie Wyatt Kent, and we wrote Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith. And the idea behind Live Like a Guide Dog is to say to people, you don't need to be afraid of everything. You can control fear. So you see now I'm back sort of where both Kim, you and Lucia are. But the bottom line is that what I wanted to do is to teach people, you don't need to be, as I put it, blinded or overwhelmed by fear. You can control it and make it a very powerful tool to help you function when unexpected and unusual things happen. And so we worked on it, and the idea behind the book is I learned a lot from working with 8 guide dogs since 1964. And then my wife's service dog also, she was in a wheelchair her whole life. And so we used the lessons I learned from working with dogs to teach people, or to give people the opportunity to learn that they can overcome fear and they don't need to let it stand in their way. And that's what Live Like a Guide Dog is about. So the storytelling started really early, but the latest is, of course, Live Like a Guide Dog, starting in 2020, and it was published in August of this year.
Wow, thank you very much, Michael. That was incredibly inspiring to listen to. I just made a couple of notes while you were talking. I think Live Like a Guide Dog is a wonderful title. The title's great, and obviously the premise of the story is great. And I think for children or young people who weren't alive at 9/11, it's great to read a very positive story like yours, from a completely different angle. So thank you for that. The other note I wrote is you said about doing a sales course when you switched careers and became a salesperson. And I think that's something that all 4 of us here have in common, that we are very willing to continue learning, because I think that's a huge thing in life. So many people get to a certain age and they think, oh, I finished my education, I don't need to learn anything more now. And I feel that they miss out so much of life because they're not willing to just learn and listen to other people. And so thank you very much, Michael. I found that incredibly interesting. Over to you, Lucia.
Yes, I remember when I interviewed Michael, he told me, Lucia, I visited the 50 states of the US, and I was giving speech, and I was mesmerized by the fact that he's so positive and it's so inspiring. So I really want to tell you, Michael, that I am very honored to have you in the podcast and here today. You are such an inspiration. Yeah.
Thank you. We literally this past Monday flew to London to do a speech on resilience, and I came back Thursday, and I leave for New York tomorrow to speak at a school district for the week. So be on the East Coast for a while. So Kim, keep the weather warm, please.
Okay, I'll work on that for you.
Yeah.
So, and Kim, you clearly have a deep love for pets. I saw your website. I interviewed you many times. So can you tell us about your book, Paw Prints on the Couch, and of course, the inspiration behind it?
The Paw Prints on the Couch, that was released last year. And then I had a second one, Paw Prints on the Kitchen Floor, that was just released a couple months ago in August. It's another anthology. They're both anthologies, kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul type books, but they're all about pets. And I have brought many different co-authors together from all around the world, and they're sharing their stories about their pets and how they've impacted their lives, how they've enriched their lives, and a lot of times even saved their lives. And just how important pets are, whether it's, cats, dogs, horses, what have you, whatever the case may be, the impact that they have on our lives. And I share the story of how my dogs have impacted my life. But actually, no, I misspoke. My dogs share how they have impacted their mom's life. So my dogs wrote their own stories because they're incredibly smart dogs. So I typed it, but they told me what they wanted to say. So the stories that they share are from their perspective in their own words. So in Paw Prints on the Couch, it was Digger. I had him for 14 years, and we all have, everybody's dog is the best dog in the world. And mine was no different. He was the best dog ever. And I always called him the old man, and he was the wise one. So the way I would hear him talking to me was always very wise, and he always uh, taught lessons, gave you lessons, gave us silly humans, taught us lessons. And so that's how he spoke. And then the dog I have now, Dexter, he comes to me as a 12-year-old boy, cocky, just full of, as my grandma would say, piss and vinegar, and just, just full of it. And so that's how his story is, like, Mom told me I got to tell this story. So here I am, and she's typing it because I don't have thumbs. And, so it's just interesting how the dogs, I feel when I look at them, I'm like, you are probably a 12-year-old little boy in there, so they share their stories. And it was just, I mean, what a blessing that animals are in our lives. And my dogs have all been rescues. And that's me. That's what I firmly believe in. And they're just amazing. And I'm a person who lives with PTSD, and my dogs they're not service dogs, but they have, for however reason or whatever reason, they intuitively know when to start nudging me or booping me with their nose to refocus me if I have, anxiety or panic attack creeping up or something of the sort, because, some days are better than others. And they know. Animals are incredibly smart. I think they're much smarter than humans, and they're much more caring.
I agree.
And some days, I just think, I just want to stay home with my dog. I don't feel like peopling some days. And so I enjoy the days with my dog. But yeah, those books they're a passion project, of the heart. And it's just amazing to read everybody else's stories too, that have participated in. I'm thinking I might have a third one just to round it out and call it a series, and that one's going to be called Paw Prints on the Porch, and then that will round that 3-book series out. But I have another book that's due out in November, actually, called Nuggets of Hope, and that's all about cultivating kindness and changing your slice of the world right where you're at, because it is possible. And if we all did that, what a different world this would be.
I always say that pets are angels in disguise. Our pets really are like family, aren't they?
Oh, yes. Well, at least they are in my house.
Yeah, they add so much deep to our lives. I have a cat. I had a cat, Fidel, and he is not here anymore. But I feel him every day in my life. I can't, it's something that I can explain. And yeah, they like us. They help us to cope with some things in life. Like I had also panic attack. And when I knew Fidel was at home with me, I felt much better. He even saved my life. I was preparing eggs, and I totally forgot and went to my room and locked the door and closed the door. And I was listening to that meow, 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 meow. And then when I opened the door, I saw that the kitchen was already full of, flames. Yeah, it was crazy. He saved my life. So I understand.
Goodness.
Yeah,
Mm,
really.
mm.
Pets are amazing.
Yeah.
And I would just like to say that hand on heart, I'm not a huge animal person, but I've had dogs and things in the past. But my daughter, who's 30, and her partner have just got a puppy, and they are beyond excited. It's their first child, and they're just beyond excited. And they came and visited me yesterday and brought the little dog, Bosley, they've called it, with them. And it's a long-haired black German Shepherd. So pretty unusual and looks like a big fat teddy bear. He's 14 weeks, but we went out for a walk on the beach, his first walk on the beach, his first swim. So they wanted his grandma to be there, which was very sweet for that. They live about an hour away. They came to me especially. And then we went and sat outside a cafe just to have a beer, just to relax. And Bosley sat with us very quietly under the table, but his little head was poking out. We must have had 30 people stop and talk to us because of the dog. Not because we were exciting or interesting, because the dog was so exciting and interesting, and a real diversity of people, young, hip, young men who looked like they would probably attack you in an alleyway. They were all turned into little fluffy boys talking to this dog. A big tall man with covered in tattoos stopped and got down on the floor and spoke to the dog. It was so, a lady in a wheelchair. It was just incredibly interesting how that dog brought so many people together, almost more than a human being would. So yeah, I just found it utterly fascinating. Anyway, I'm diversifying, and now I've lost my questions. Just one moment, I'll be with you. I got talking and I think I flicked my screen accidentally. So now I don't know what I'm supposed to ask anyone. Here we go. Okay, so it's my turn to ask Michael a question, I think. Is that right, Lucia?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Michael, I'd love to hear about your children's book, Running with Roselle. What inspired this story, and does it reflect your own experience with animals? I mean, obviously, from what you've already said, I know it does. And I now know who Roselle is. But I think to write for children is a great thing because they see the world through different eyes than we do. So to actually hear about someone who's been through certain experiences, I think is really good. So thank you. May I just ask you to answer the question if I've asked the question in a sensible way?
Well, so Running with Roselle was really written to tell my story growing up, because I've been blind my entire life. And so it's also in part about educating people about blindness, but it was also written to tell Roselle's story growing up and then how we eventually met and what we did after that. And eventually, of course, we were in the World Trade Center together. So the idea was to write it in a way that would resonate with children. And as I said, though, in reality, although children like it, and I haven't ever heard a negative comment about it, more adults purchase it than people who purchase it for children, because I think it resonates with them as well. The whole idea is that we want people to learn the things that we've all been talking about here regarding pets and so on. What you were just talking about with regard to people stopping you and your granddog going down the street and so on. If my immediate thought about that was if people would only take that to the next level with their own pets. That is to say, in reality, we don't really overall learn how to communicate with our animals, and we don't generally give them the credit that they deserve. The fact is, however, that let's take dogs as an example. Dogs really want to please us, and they're looking for us to be their pack leaders, to really tell them what the rules are and what we want. And I hear so many times when I go to places, oh, my dog could never behave like your dog. My dog just jumps up on the couch, jumps up on people, and so on. My dog could never do what your dog does. And the reality is, we're the ones who need to learn what to do to communicate what we desire in a positive way to our dogs. And the fact of the matter is, if you talk to anyone at any humane association, humane society, and so on, and you talk about the classes that they teach to train dogs to do the right thing, 90% of the training is really training the human, not the dog, because it's really about us working to teach people, or it should be, how they can better communicate and establish a positive relationship with their dogs. So, for example, I am on my 8th guide dog, Alamo, who's my first black lab, but it's all about building a team relationship. And if you look at it that way, even within a family, if you build a team relationship with your animals, you will get a lot more out of them. You will find that they can offer a lot more to you. And that's one of the things that we really tried to see people understand in Running with Roselle. And in fact, in all three of the books that I've written, it's all about recognizing that we have to work together as a team to get things done. What people don't understand about guide dogs because of their misconceptions about blindness is dogs don't lead blind people. They never, never, never lead blind people. What they do is they guide. What's the difference? I'm the one that needs to tell the dog step by step where I want the dog to go and when to turn and so on. The dog's job is to make sure that we walk safely as a team. And the fact of the matter is, and people go, well, how do you know where to go? Well, you don't have to see to know where to go. I have techniques and tools that I use just like sighted people do. The problem is that sighted people think they're the only ones that are really normal in town. But the fact is, just be in a room and suddenly the lights go out and you can't find your smartphone right away. Who's more capable of functioning in that kind of environment? You all are light dependent. You have as much a disability as I do. What we need to understand is that disability is not a lack of ability. Disability is a characteristic that everyone shares. It just manifests itself differently depending on who you are. So all three books, and especially for kids, Running with Roselle is all about teaching some of these lessons and teaching people that blindness isn't the problem, it's people's attitudes about it, and that dogs and Hingson are great, wonderful people to have around.
Well, Michael, I am so inspired by your words. I can see why you'd be a fabulous speaker and obviously very much in demand because you are incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Lucia.
My pleasure.
So now I have a question for both of you. Okay. So writing about animals often brings out some of the most universal feelings of love, empathy, and of course, friendship. So Kim, how have your readers responded to your books, and have any of their reactions surprised you?
I think without fail, the folks that have emailed me or, that I've talked to in person, they've all loved the stories and they can all resonate. Not with every story, but with at least one story in the book, they can resonate with it. Like the silliness, the antics that animals do, throughout their lives, or that really hard goodbye that you have to do. It's a tough thing, and we all go through it if we have, pets in our lives in any capacity. So I think they've all of the comments and the feedback have been very heartfelt and very moving, actually. And there was one story, I guess surprising, was one that I wrote in the first Paw Prints on the Couch. It was the last story of the book, and it was called A Special Visit. And it was a dream that I had had 3 weeks after I had had to say goodbye to Digger, which was my dog at that time. And it was a very, very vivid dream. And I walk my dogs every day, miles. And so I would often joke with people saying, oh my gosh, the hundreds of miles that I put on my shoes and this dog has put on his paws, And so the dream was me walking down a path in the woods, like I always did with Digger, but I was by myself because Digger was no longer with me. But then he showed up. And he came he came in this big blast of white light and was super, super excited, saying, oh my gosh, Mom, you are not going to believe where I'm at. And like super exuberant in the dream, telling me where he's at and that he was taking walks with God. And that's who I talked to all the time when Digger and I were taking our walks. And he's like, do you remember who you talked to? And that's who I'm walking with. Can you believe that, Mom? And so this dream was so vivid. And as soon as I woke up, I wrote it down. And there's a line in there that Digger says to me. And he says, Mom, do you know what happens when God laughs? And I said, no, I don't know what happens when God laughs. And he said, it's like all the souls are singing, Mom. All the souls are singing, and all the love in all the world is here. And yours
Oh,
came with me too. So you don't need to be sad.
oh,
And it was just such an amazing dream. And I wrote that story as soon as I woke up. Golly, golly, it still chokes me up. Um, that story, I got a lot of feedback on saying, oh my gosh, that helped people
yeah.
when they had to say goodbye to their dogs because it
Mm,
gave them a sense of peace. And I'm always saying to people, you know, it's so hard not to focus on that last day or that last half hour or those last few minutes before you say goodbye. Oh my goodness, you've got look at the years that you had,
mm,
you know, and
mm.
I had to remind myself of that too. You know, I was focusing on that last day, that super hard day of saying goodbye. I'm like, gosh, Digger was part of my life for 14 years. Kim, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
you can't take all those 14 years and shove it down into this one last 24 hours of sadness. Oh my gosh. So that dream, the way it came to me was super helpful for me. And then when people read it, and they still do, I still get comments every once in a while from it. Um, it's been helping them too. And I find that as a blessing, that just an unexpected blessing, you know? And so, yeah, that's kind of the most unexpected one. Yeah.
I love this. I love this dream. And yes, I was almost crying when you were
Yeah,
talking.
me too. Me too. Yeah.
Me too.
And Michael, how have your readers, let's say, what are their feedback to your books? And have any of their reactions surprised you?
The thing that surprises me most, it goes back to humans as opposed to dogs, right? And cats, by the way. I have a cat who's almost 15. Her name is Stitch. She was a rescue almost 10 years ago. She runs the house, so it's okay. But the most surprising thing is sometimes, as much as I try to explain different things to people in the book, that some people don't get it. One day I spoke to a book club, and I was assured that everyone in the book club had read Thunderdog, my first book. But when it came time to questions, the first question that somebody asked was, well, what were you doing in the World Trade Center? Excuse me, we spent a couple of chapters talking about what I was doing in the World Trade Center. People don't always pay attention. They come into things with their own preconceived notions. So I'm surprised sometimes how people are not nearly as open to looking at alternative ways of thinking as perhaps they should be. But I've also been extremely blessed the vast majority of the time with people who say, we liked what you had to say, we've learned so much, and we are looking forward to the next thing that you write, but we really value the lessons that you've given us. So I think it goes both ways, but the fact of the matter is, mostly people, I think, really do want to get a better perception and perspective, and they just need to learn to be a little bit more open to it. But I think that it's my job to try to draw them in. So one of the things that people say to me all the time when I speak about the World Trade Center is, you really draw us in. We feel like we're there when you're telling your story. And that to me is the best compliment I could get, because I've realized that telling my story now, 23 years later, is telling a story to a lot of people who have absolutely no memory of the World Trade Center, or who have forgotten so many things. And so my job is to try to draw them in and to make them feel like they were there. And so I do that both in the books that I write. And so with all the lessons in Live Like a Guide Dog, it's the same thing. I want to draw them in so that they understand the value of what dogs do. So for example, a real quick lesson, dogs love unconditionally. I believe that absolutely. But dogs don't trust unconditionally. But the difference between dogs and people is that dogs, unless you really injure a dog or hurt a dog in some way, which can happen and is unfortunate, and people need to learn not to do that. But dogs are more open to trust, and they want to develop that relationship. And the thing about a dog is they don't do what if like we do. We are so afraid because we what if everything under the sun. And one of the mantras that I learned early on after September 11th is don't worry about what you can't control. Just focus on the things you can and leave the rest alone. And you'll be all right. Because the reality is if you can't control it, don't fear it, don't worry about it, be aware of it, but deal with what you can control, and life is a whole lot better. Dogs don't do what if. When Roselle and I got home after September 11th, or in the evening of September 11th, I took her harness off and I was going to take her outside. She'd have none of it. She ran off, grabbed her favorite tug toy, and started playing tug of war with my retired guide dog, Linny, because it was over. Nothing threatened her that day. And when it was over, it was over. And she never worried about it again. And those are the kinds of lessons that we talk about and Live Like a Guide Dog to, again, get people to start to realize they can be a lot more focused on what they do have influence over, because you can't control what may happen to you if you don't have any way to deal with it. We had no control over the World Trade Center happening. And I've read a lot of reports and nobody has yet demonstrated to me that we could have known it in advance. But what we each and every one of us have control over is how we deal with the World Trade Center and how we deal with the things that happen in our lives. So I try to convey that. And a lot of people say yes, yes, but by the same token, I'm not sure how many always really follow through and learn that lesson. But all I can do is continue to repeat it and talk about it, and hopefully people will understand it and get it.
Tell Pat, I know you want to make comments about it.
No, I'm just kind of just so impressed, Michael. Your level of compassion and yet common sense linked together is quite remarkable, I think.
I learned it from a bunch of dogs.
Yeah, it's just yeah. I don't really know what to say. I'm just very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been
yes. Go
yeah.
ahead.
It's just been a fascinating panel this morning. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much, both Kim and Michael. You've both brought such a lot of depth to it, and it's been extremely enjoyable. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
As also Kim, I really admire your work. You've been doing so many things. I said that she's even a podcaster. So I want to tell you, thank you very much for supporting us. You're always with us. This means a lot, and we really appreciate your work and you as a person. And yes, thank you for sharing your beautiful stories and your love for animals with us. It's been inspiring to hear about the impact of pets on your writing and how you bring that joy to readers of all ages, not only kids, but of course, adults. And also I want to thank Pat. Thank you, Pat, for co-hosting this meaningful discussion with me. So it was really amazing to be here. I wish we could stay for more hours. And also thank you everyone for joining us at Uncut with Lucia, hosted by wordauthors.org. To our audience, don't miss out on the works of Kim Lengling and Michael Hingson. You can also download our magazine for free and learn more about our guests and, of course, their books at www.relatable-media.com. And thank you very much.